Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. We have a big group today, and it's nice to see so many of your faces. My name is Carrie Kelly. I am Executive Director of the Arizona Association for Economic Development, or AAED. The mission of AAED is to serve as Arizona's unified voice advocating for responsible economic development. We do this through educate, advocate, and collaborate. Our membership consists not only of economic developers, but those from the private sector as well, who wish to advocate for policies that create a vibrant and strong Arizona economy. And so art and placemaking are critically vital to a strong and vibrant economy. And we're honored to have such a wonderful panel here today. I want to give a big shout out and thank you to our events committee for putting this webinar together and to Smith Group for sponsoring this event. Our moderator today is Mackenzie Hale, the Director of Business Development with Smith Group, and I will turn it over to her.
All right. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming here today for this discussion. We've had a lot of people, respond and sign up for this. So we're just really excited to have this chat, and I think people are really interested in it. So thank you to our wonderful panelists here today. We have Amanda Elliott, Redevelopment Program Manager for the town of Gilbert, Julina Bustamante, Director of Business Development at Ritchie Powell and Associates, John Owens, Downtown Redevelopment Specialist at City of Chandler, and Katrina Kahler, President and CEO of ArtLink. So we have a really wonderful group here today, and really I'm just here to let them have an open conversation. And I think Amanda Elliott here is going to kick it off and kind of walk you through representation of community through the arts.
Great, thank you. Okay, let me just pull up my slides here so you guys can see them. I wanted to just have some imagery so you can understand what we're talking about here. And give me 1 second because I have to turn this up at presenter view. Okay. So as we start to talk about placemaking, we are talking about all aspects of the built environment. And so I thought it'd be important to share that Gilbert has a very specific set of design guidelines that help us essentially create a cohesive character of our downtown area. And this really came through the fact that we're an ARS designated redevelopment area. And as such, that designation allows you to have a design review board specific to your redevelopment area. So while we have our planning commission that oversees all of the plan sets for the rest of the town, we have what we call our redevelopment commission, and they oversee the design of the heritage district. So they're intimately familiar with what we're trying to achieve through the character. And certainly that character has been created over the last 30 years, through public input. And so just to show you, how do we work with developers and architects and contractors as they're looking at building? The design guidelines have an intro in each section and then a map. So if I'm a developer, I look at the map and I look at which street I'm developing on. And then from there, I go to that street. For this one example is called Festival Street. This is an area that is a curbless environment. And so we try to help the developers and architects understand what experience we're trying to create. We have some precedent and imagery in there and a street cross section. And then it really gets into the details of the environment. How do we move people through this environment? What are we trying to achieve? What is unique to this street section compared to the others, but what is that cohesive, character that's tied throughout? And so you have, bullets that relate to those design guidelines, and then certainly an axonometric, which starts to help them visualize what we're trying to achieve. So that kind of sets the tone when we talk about placemaking, and helps those who are building in this area, and certainly the city, have a very clear direction. But I think it's really important to talk about authenticity as well. We get a lot of questions about our water tower. And so on the left, you can see our water tower years ago. It was actually our very first town purchase. So as you can imagine, when you think of a water tower, particularly, I'm from the Midwest, and so water tower doesn't seem that incredibly important, from that position. But when you think of it as our very first town purchase, now we're really talking to who Gilbert is and what created this area, made it so special. So the citizens actually came together to help with renovations of the water tower, and we did some CIP projects around it, in which we have a splash pad now under the water tower, and we've added really distinctive lighting. And so it's become kind of this iconic image of Gilbert and what people think of in the original town site and our first purchase. And I think it's just really critical that, as you look at what are those centerpieces for your community, that those are ones that are authentic to who your community is. When we talk about like art and murals, this is a really interesting conversation for us, because I just wanted to share this example. So this is a mural for Zinberger. And this mural came in and it was, quite controversial in a way. We had, merchants and residents who didn't like it. We had merchants and residents who loved it. We had multiple departments across the town who were all working on various art projects, and art is just incredibly subjective. And so in the past, it was just a really rigorous process for those who wanted to install a mural. What we were able to do is work with planning and work with our legal department to really kind of cut some of that red tape that was creating just a challenge for people to put in art. This one is a little bit unique in the sense that they also included this as signage, because you can see their name is at the top. But at this point, we don't regulate a mural. They just have to meet our decency code. And if they have, any type of advertising, so if they're demonstrating what their product is inside the building, or they have their name on the building, they have to contribute that towards their signage. Otherwise, the art is free range. They're open to put whatever mural they'd like on the side of their buildings. Because of us working together to really create an easier process overall, since the Zinberger mural and that new process, we have seen 9 new murals coming onto private buildings. So we're seeing more and more come into the Heritage District because of the ease of installing them. And then I also wanted to just share, I talked about authenticity. And so this is a picture of a 600 stall parking garage and one of the festival streets at Curbless Environment Street. This area used to be single family residential. And we really want to think through in every single aspect of the downtown when we're curating it. We want to think through what is our history and what is our culture, and how do we do a nod to our history with this kind of modern look that we have on the street. And so you'll see on this street, there are a circular pattern. And on the adjacent street, there is a hatch pattern. And what those really signify are the 2 crops that were actually rotated by a family on the site. And so it just is a nod to Gilbert's history and our culture. And we're trying to impart that in every aspect of this place that we're creating. But you look at this and a lot of people ask, was this a public art piece? Because those hoop lights are just really distinctive. We look at that from both daytime and nighttime. So how does it overall, interact with that environment? We are just really lucky, to have a capital improvements project team that is very creative and looking for opportunities to just create a really unique place that relates to our design guidelines. So I'm going to hand it over to the next speaker. But before I do, I just wanted to just mention a couple things. So for our, public sector on there, I think, finding those solution-oriented ways to bring departments together when there's challenges, particularly around placemaking, is really important. Advocating for your community's authenticity and not creating or recreating what other communities are doing. And then look at opportunities to sit and have a seat at the table on capital improvement projects in key corridors or growth areas or city centers that allow you to help impart that voice of your own culture and community's history. And then for the private sector, the way that you can support placemaking in our communities is certainly idea sharing, brainstorming, helping us understand that creative mindset, sharing your return on investment. If you are including art on your projects, being able to share the direct and indirect return on investment on that, and then getting involved, attending public meetings, being on commissions and stakeholder groups is just really incredibly helpful to us creating these places.
Thank you so much, Amanda. That was wonderful and just really helpful to see those visuals as well. Those hoop lights are certainly very distinctive and beautiful. I wanted to go ahead and bring the conversation over to Dorina as she talks about placemaking and placekeeping and the impact on private development.
Thank you, Mackenzie, and bravo, Amanda, because you teed up everything I'm about to talk about so perfectly, coming from the private sector standpoint. Hi, everyone. Thank you, AAED, and everyone for putting on this conversation today, because for many of us, this is life and really what we're most passionate about. So as I am Director of Business Development for Rittok Powell Associates Civil Engineering, 43-year-old civil engineering firm, I've known Carl Oberg for years and years, and we do a lot of work in the downtown community. And that's one of the reasons why, and in the arts and economic development, which is one of the reasons why I joined the firm last year. And from the standpoint of placemaking and placekeeping, I always like to add the keeping standpoint. As a fifth generation Arizonan, I always like to remind people and pay tribute to the original people of this land, their elders past and present, and their descendants of today, who are the native communities in the surrounding area, who were the true geniuses and innovators in figuring out the civil engineering and the waterways in this land. So I take issue when we talk about Phoenix being a baby city. We're really an ancient place, but that's another AAED conversation. So my background is in private development, but really engaging as citizen-led action to create public-private partnerships, all the things that Amanda was talking about. I love hearing municipalities creating opportunities for citizen-led action and great ideas from a normal person, and to feel comfortable approaching people at your city. They're normal people too, and they also have great ideas. And more often than not, they also have great ideas as well, and will mostly agree with you and create a path. And that's where I have found great success, and also offering that from an economic and real estate development and community development standpoint over the last 15 years with private sector developers, with Downtown Phoenix Inc., with True North Studio, as most specifically on the Roosevelt Row neighborhood of Evans Churchill in downtown Phoenix. So we have a lot to cover, and I know that we're gonna get into it, but I think some of the main things that I want to remind everyone is, we can squeeze in art early on as long as we know the pro forma, and as long as developers know how to do it in interesting ways. So if they need to drop 50 grand on an iron gate because that's what the city is requiring them to do, that's $50,000 of a commission of Ruben Gonzalez or Pete Dice original work that was really going to add value. And those are like little nuggets that we can talk about along the way. But from a placemaking standpoint, really thinking about places from a temporary standpoint and how that can be catalytic for change in helping to draw attention to neighborhoods, and really great creating alliances and sharing assets and resources. So in the Roosevelt Row neighborhood of downtown Phoenix, there was a huge initiative around the downturn of the recession, of the Great Recession, but even before that, of the temporary activation of vacant spaces. And that led to really looking at the neighborhood in ways of taking down the boarded up windows and doors, and taking down the chain link fence of a vacant property, and doing something interesting and authentic, to Amanda's point, that could be utilized as a temporary activation that usually the property owner and the community are really happy to co-invest in. And that helps with placemaking. From a placekeeping standpoint, we don't need to knock everything down. We know there are a lot of great gems in our neighborhoods. Back to the authenticity aspects also, let's look at, maybe sometimes when we come into neighborhoods, people have been there first and longer, and have also had great ideas and have had challenges in overcoming them. So I have found that working in private sector, when we're welcoming all this attention into our neighborhoods, wherever it is across the valley, just being really authentic with the client and with the city about measuring expectations, but also making introductions to the people who were already there and doing the great work, because a lot of the time they might already have done the white paper or put together the concept, and they just need some more chutzpah or funding that another counterpart can come up with. So those are a lot of the great things that I really love to advocate for, and I know everyone here on this call can do. And Mackenzie, if we have another moment, I have a case study as an example with the deck of slides for Roosevelt and 2nd Street, if you can pull that up. So this is 2nd Street and Roosevelt. I like to joke about Mike Davis, who's a personal friend and mentor, Mike Davis of the Davis Group, that it's 2 degrees of Mike Davis in the Valley, because at some point someone worked with Mike Davis or DFD, Knoyer Hedrick, or Davis at some point, and that's always a fun fact. But he owned this piece of property at 2nd Street and Roosevelt at the northeast corner next to Monorchid. And it was formerly an office building that burnt down, and all that was left was a parking shelter. And with that parking shelter, it was just that. And during a period of time, we utilized that piece of property as a catalytic conversation point about what should go there and how to create a tactical urbanism intervention that would benefit the neighborhood, but cause communication and conversation, and just be super random. And this was also during the time when Bird on Fire and Phoenix was being looked at as one of the most unsustainable cities. So we took this vacant lot. If you go back to the first slide, which is over here at 2nd Street and Roosevelt, it just looks like dirt. And this is just all in the right of way. Well, we took it as an opportunity to go out to the public and survey the community and ask what should go here from a temporary standpoint. And then along the way, we also asked them what they'd like to see there permanently. Coincidentally, permanently, or interestingly enough, permanently, they all wanted high density. They wanted more residential. They wanted apartments. They wanted a spectrum of affordability. But from a temporary standpoint, they wanted trees, they wanted grass, they wanted public art, they wanted a place to walk their dog. So we then, if you kind of go through these slides, we then embarked upon doing a study and looking at vacant spaces and parking spaces and how you can activate them from a temporary standpoint and create that dialogue and raise attention and raise awareness and bring people together. So as you can see here, this is Bill McDonough, Mayor Stanton, and Colin Tetreault talking about sustainability issues at that pop-up park, which was the irony of it all. So sometimes being totally juxtaposed is a good way to make the point and get the conversation going and getting people involved, which really helped with the economic development of this neighborhood, as Katrina can attest to later on in our presentation. So we can slide through this. So this is when big ideas go bananas and when people think there's no budget. So this is that same vacant lot, and we got a grant for shipping containers. It was $10,000. It sounds like $1 million. And by the way, shipping containers are very expensive to retrofit. This idea never happened. But if you click through, it was a really wonderful idea and concept, and probably resources are better now. Mind you, this was 2012. But the idea was a mixed use multimodal experience that was all temporal. Film, bike racks, car charging, entertainment hub, if this was going to be there for an extended period of time. All of its infrastructure is so expensive. That's the location right there between Central and this I-10 freeway, right there in the heart of downtown Phoenix. And a lot has changed, and I thought it was interesting to show this from 2012 because it's 2001, and boy, do we have a lot to, have we learned so much, and do we have so much to share? So with that, I'll hand it off to John, because we have a lot to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you, Darina. That was really a helpful example to see, and it's always great to see a case study in action like that. So I'll hand it over to John, and really he'll bring it back to municipalities and look at what it looks like in Chandler and the impact on pedestrian engagement and urban development.
Well, thanks, Mackenzie. Thanks, Darina. And thanks, Carrie, for putting this on. Thank you all for being here. Amanda and Darina both touched on a lot of things that we'll touch on here, but I'm hoping I can put it in a slightly different perspective because, all of these places are unique, whether it's Roosevelt Row, downtown Gilbert, downtown Chandler, any of the other urban centers in the Valley. Each has its own unique history and its own unique place. And Darina, I really liked that you mentioned placekeeping. I thought that was really poignant, especially for downtown Chandler, which is, for the most part, at least in our square, over 100 years old at this point. So we're talking about a real historic downtown, and I want to show that a little bit. So bear with me while I pull up a photo. All right, can everybody see that photo? Great. So this is an aerial of downtown Chandler. And one of the things I want to call out is that we're very fortunate to have this beautiful park right in the center. It's our historic square. And this is really what downtown Chandler was founded around, and Chandler more broadly. It was a big park, sort of a traditional square setup, and then densely packed retail businesses along with a colonnade that surrounded it. And what makes it really interesting is that, uh, you know, it gives us a natural opportunity to really create a sense of place, but it also creates a bunch of unique challenges because we're dealing with historic buildings and we're dealing with a lot of history, a lot of people who have connections to that place. And so what we've done over time, in addition to public art and other things, is that we've created a zoning overlay that allows us to gather citizens to give feedback that's outside the traditional plan review process, so that it's viewed with an eye for history to make sure that we're in keeping with the history while allowing for modernity to come in. And how that's manifested is really interesting. So I will share a different photo here if you don't mind. Sorry, I've got multiple screens going on. A lot of how that's manifested is through adaptive reuse. And one of the things that we are really happy to see is adaptive reuse. What you see here is the Sleepy Whale. It's one of my favorite places in downtown Chandler. And what's really exciting about the Sleepy Whale is that this took an old auto-oriented business and transformed it into a really exciting place to grab a craft beer. It's right on Arizona Avenue. If you haven't been, you should go. But one of the things that's great about it is it creates an interesting vibe, and we're all familiar with adaptive reuse at this point. But the other thing I want to draw your attention to is the mural that they put up along there. So public art tends to spark private art, right? We put up murals as a city, and the community wants to get involved and put these pieces of art on their properties as well. So in this case, it's a Chandler mural. It's unique, but what it does is it also tells you where you are. And as sort of silly as that sounds, being able to very rapidly identify where you are is really helpful for us as redevelopers, whether it's shared on social media or it's taken in a professional photo like this. Like, you look at this and you know that this building is in Chandler, it's in downtown Chandler. So we've also done that in our public art in a really interesting way. So right here, this is one of our most recent mural additions to downtown Chandler. This is literally saying downtown Chandler. It's along Commonwealth, but it also is next to a canal project that we spent a lot of time putting together. This is believe it or not, an award-winning project. It's amazing that the simple and beautiful places for people to walk can have such a big impact, right? So this was an old ditch at one point. It was surrounded by oleanders. It was really unpleasant. People didn't want to be near it. Right next door, like this wall, is the wall for the San Marcos Hotel, which is the anchor for downtown Chandler, a historic, wonderful, grand hotel that was right next to this ditch. So we went in, we created a wonderful walkable place. There are historical plaques and backlit boards along this. And the last piece of it was putting this mural in last summer. Not only does it tell you where it is, it's a beautiful piece, and it connects to the environment around it, right? We've got water in it. We've got the hummingbirds you see around the path very often. And one of the things that we like to do, going back to the place keeping, is try to keep things local in our artists. And I think that's really impactful because they have a sense of what a place is, what a place's culture is, and how to bring that forward in public art. So in this case, the artist is a graduate of Chandler High School. This was her first mural. She's at ASU now. And for her first mural, I think she did pretty well. Hard to complain about that work. It's hundreds of feet long, and she really knocked it out of the park. But what was great is going back to that sense of community and culture. While she was working, the folks who live in and around downtown Chandler got to know her. She took the time to get to know them as someone who's lived nearby a lot of her life. And I think it added to the mural that she knew kind of where we were and where she was and what she was creating. But going back to that, we also like to more explicitly include history in our art. Real quick. I have too many photos open. Give me one moment. And so we like to include history in our art in a way that is really literal. And so part of that is because we have such a rich history here in downtown Chandler. And part of that is because, we have really wonderful artists who can communicate it in a beautiful way. So this is a mural that we recently put up in a breezeway in downtown Chandler. And you'll notice that it's bright and bold and colorful and quite frankly, very Instagrammable, which we're quite happy about. But it also, in these vignettes, takes the time to tell the story of Chandler chronologically in a really interesting way. And part of the reason for that is because this connects our historic square to a brand new development called New Square. We really like the historical connection there. But you'll see photos of the empty desert. You'll see photos or vignettes that are based on photos of the San Marcos further down. And it's been a massive impact. It's created a sense of safety for people who want to walk through this breezeway. It's given them a reason to be there. And so we're continuing to work on that. But it brings up a couple other things, right? Urban places need to be walkable. So they need to have a reason to keep walking. They need to feel safe when you're walking. And they need to, in our case, be shaded when you're walking a lot of the time. So you need to give people a reason to keep moving, right? Whether they park and get out of their car and walk around for several hours or otherwise. What we've tried to do is identify the gaps, whether it's this breezeway, which connects two important pieces of downtown, or the Commonwealth mural, which now with new development along the way will connect that to that new development. We've tried to give people a reason to keep moving throughout downtown. And I don't want to make this sound sort of clinical when it comes to art, right? Like we put this here for this reason. Obviously, we want the art to be beautiful and otherwise, but there are alternative reasons that are really helpful for us in terms of creating a safe, walkable urban environment. I want to stop here as well and briefly talk about kind of how our department in Chandler is set up, because I think it impacts a lot of how this comes to life. I'm in what's called the Cultural Development Department of the City of Chandler. And what that means is that my colleagues are the Chandler Center for the Arts, our Visual Arts Coordinator and Vision Gallery, which is our art gallery based in City Hall and at the Center for the Arts, our special events, and our museum. And the reason we set that department up that way with downtown, which is more of an economic development function, is because we view downtown Chandler not only as the place where a lot of these events happen, but as a destination driver in its own right. So we want to build a sense of place that both accommodates all of these other cultural activities, whether it's concerts or events or historical pieces, but also is a reason in of itself to be there. And so we're really fortunate, and I'm really fortunate to get work closely with our visual arts coordinator and our museum to put things like this together. The final thing I want to show you is actually a parking garage, which is perhaps the least exciting way to end it. And most people don't get super excited about a parking garage, but I get excited about this one for several reasons. First and foremost, because it provides much needed parking outside of the square, right? It's sort of on the edges so people can park and walk without it being too far. But perhaps more importantly, because with this garage as a publicly funded project, we included 3 public art pieces, which is really impactful and I think gives it a little bit more excitement than a regular garage. So you'll notice that the stairwell is lit up. That's on both stairwells. We can change the colors to reflect the time of year. Light is a really impactful way to create a sense of place, and we use it a lot. You may have seen City Hall lit up at night in Chandler. We've got these wonderful art benches on both the north and south side that also identify what side you're on. And perhaps more importantly, in Morse code, tell you welcome to Chandler on them, which is very fun. And then we've got these shade sails along the front here, and they channel the light differently in different times of year to create a really interesting pedestrian experience. So this parking garage is more than anything else. And at the end of the day, I think what it represents is our commitment to putting public art with our public projects, because we know that not only does it make it a place you want to be, but it also connects with the history and the culture, and really is just a great way to continue the redevelopment of the downtown and create sort of sticky business development pieces there. I want to be mindful of time. So with that, I will wrap up here and stop sharing my screen. But I really appreciate the chance to talk about what we're doing down here. And I will kick it over to Katrina.
Thank you, John.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, John. I love that I'm actually speaking last here because how inspiring was that? I mean, everything we were about, we just saw just speaks to and demonstrates the leadership that the cities here in the Valley of the Sun are taking when it comes to the public art conversation. Whether you live in the Valley or somewhere in the state of Arizona, we have a lot to be proud of in this community. And that's really inspiring. So I applaud each and every one of you. My name is Katrina Kaler. I am the president and CEO of ArtLink Inc. We are a 33-year-old nonprofit organization born from artists right here in downtown Phoenix. I'm actually in Midtown, so I kind of fudged that a little bit. But this organization, like many others, actually there aren't that many that have been around that long, especially those that were founded by artists. So we feel very fortunate to have that history and that lineage behind us. When it comes to how we approach, how we do things, we keep it really simple, because when it comes to arts and culture, things can get complicated and mired in details very quickly. So first and foremost, we live up to our name, the ArtLink. And so we follow in the fantastic footsteps of our municipalities here in the Valley and across the state, and really try to fill in the gaps. I think that phrase was used earlier, where they cannot facilitate a connection with the artist community. We try to step in and help in a myriad of ways. We are also here to say, I am also here to say that as much as we are all interested in arts and culture and want to forge this path further and stronger as we move forward into the future, I am here to say that the artist community is here for it. It is here for it. It is a broad, deep pool of talent here in the state of Arizona. And there are a myriad of art forms that are created here. And it is a multifaceted community that can connect in a variety of places across the Valley and the state, and a variety of conversations, I would say. For any of those of you who are interested in tourism, or even if you're not interested in tourism, if you believe that tourism actually has an economic value, the cultural tourism here in Arizona is nearly unparalleled. I mean, our history is phenomenal and worth celebrating. And when you look at arts and culture in terms of a trajectory of time, not only are we in a really important moment in time right now, but our history is also worth celebrating. And when you build on an authentic history, coupling that with where we are today in 2021, and think about where we can go as we move forward, to do that hand in hand and linked with the artist community is a really strong position to be in when it comes to community and economic development. So just a little bit more about me, and I think it'll speak to why I'm personally so passionate about this. I didn't study art in school. I am not an artist. Don't play Pictionary with me. I am not even good with the stick figures. None of that. I have been in downtown since 2003. Before that, I was in the Valley in '89, and before that, I was born in Tucson, Arizona. So I'm a native of Arizona. From a young age, I believed in the heart and the personality and the offerings of this state. And I find it very fortunate today that I'm able to actually connect with the artist community and celebrate that. But in between, when I was little and celebrating, the sandbox in Tucson, and then living in the White Mountains for a while and celebrating the pine trees there, I've been in the Valley, and my background was sports and event marketing. And so I had a front row seat to the economic effect of the sports world. And I think we're done building Cactus League stadiums for a while. I represented the Cactus League for several years. That's how I started my career. I did promotions in Cactus League spring training stadiums and delivered the lemonade to row 205 seats G and H. in the middle of the 5th inning in the Peoria Sports Complex. I saw firsthand the economic development that this activity brought to all of the cities across the valley, primarily the suburbs, right? But we're kind of, that was like wave 1 of economic activity. Sports is huge and tremendous asset when it comes to economic activity. We're kind of set now. We've got the 4 teams, we've got the spring training, we have soccer now, we have the Mercury. We are golden when it comes to sports. What's next? Arts and culture, period. It's the same. People pay and buy tickets to go to performances. They buy artworks that enhance their experience. They become fans of the artists. I mean, this is a very rich field to sow. And we've only scratched the surface in terms of what we can do to position the arts and culture community and our investment in that community when it comes to the community and economic development of our valiant state. And so as we move forward, I have 2 very quick slides I'm going to share because I honestly don't have to make the case for how great it is. I think the last 3 presenters did that in spades, right? I mean, you're already seeing in the cities, and based on what Dorita is talking about, this is a worthwhile effort. And if you're not sold, we can have a whole other conversation. I'll answer any questions. I'll try to answer any questions you have. But I will say, just conversationally, and anecdotally over the past maybe handful of years, we are less often having to make the case about why arts and culture is important. That is a victory. That is a victory, because many, many years ago, even when I came downtown Phoenix in 2003, all of the conversations center around where is the culture? Where's the jelly and the donut? Where do we find it? Fewer people are asking, does it exist? Now the questions, especially amongst this wonderful group here, some of you have already answered the question, but some of you may be asking, okay, you've sold me, now what? How do we go about that? Well, before we do that, what I want to show you briefly is this. If I can do this ever so briefly. Please don't consider this name dropping. Please consider this a well-paved path. Along with Gilbert and Chandler, who you just heard, City of Phoenix and many other cities are highly invested in arts and culture, as they should be. In addition to that, the state agencies, the Arts Commission, Downtown Phoenix Inc. is a huge proponent of arts and culture. Valley Metro transit system, they're focused on getting people around town. Why do they care about arts and culture? Because they're literally taking people place to place where arts and culture exists. And they're also investing in the light rail stations and the Arts Line program that reminds people that arts and culture is what makes places great. It actually gives you the incentive to take a bus or a light rail train to a destination, right? In addition to our public partners, here are just a smattering of private partners, foundations, hotels, residential complexes, and much more, in architecture firms. I mean, this is just a smattering of some of the partners we have worked with. This is just the past several months. This isn't a full summary. Park Central in particular, I'm going to take this down now as we talk, but Park Central in particular, many of you might know Sharon Harper and Stan, of course I'm blanking his name, sorry Stan, Hello companies and Plaza companies who own Park Central in Midtown Phoenix. This is where I'm reporting to you live from today. In our storage room, actually. We have a great mural behind us by Backpack. I just want to point that out. That's New York in terms of city and arts. Okay, so Plaza companies and Hello companies, they knew when they focused on Park Central, which many of you probably know, sat empty for decades in the heart of town, right? No wonder people asked about the hole in the donut, right? I mean, in the heart of our town, in the heart of the 5th largest city in the country, at the cross section of Central and Thomas, was Park Central, the oldest shopping mall in Phoenix, built in the 50s, sat empty. So it took these 2 fantastic developers to partner. They had already partnered on SkySong, and they partnered on the redevelopment of Park Central. Redevelopment. They didn't knock it down. They refreshed it. They refined it. They shined it a little bit. And now it's an amazing multi-use campus. They also knew, and they were well informed, I will say, but absolutely believe it and walk the walk and talk the talk. They knew that a connection with the arts and culture community, especially in this part of town, was critical. It's critical to placemaking. It's critical to placekeeping. And now with our upcoming basement project that we are partnering on, I would also add place finding. More to come. Okay, that's a whole other session. We have to schedule other sessions. So imagine the place finding and the discovery of spaces. You all know of these spaces. You're thinking of spaces right now that would be amazing settings for arts and culture, whether it's a canvas for visual arts or a stage for performing arts. It's a runway for fashion. I mean, a myriad of things. These are all possible. These are all possible. What I'm here to say to all of you, and some of you already know this, I mean, we are, and let me just shout out to Local First. I mean, ArtLink, I mean, Local First knows and has putting out the message for years that local is a marketing asset. They haven't said it in those words, but that's exactly what it is. And I'm here to say, number one, arts and culture is also a marketing asset. How do you differentiate one community from another? How do you differentiate one neighborhood or one development from one another? There are enough messages, there are many different approaches in terms of visual style and sensibility, where every one of your projects can be celebrated and not the same. There's no homogeneous approach here. It's not necessary. You don't want that. We don't want that. Certainly the public doesn't want that. And the public, and this is a population that can live anywhere in the country and do the work that they're doing, many of them. And this is a competitive advantage for us. And let's do it. So finally, what I want to say, I shouldn't say finally, there's probably more. When it comes to economic development, I'll say from downtown's perspective, ArtLink for many years has promoted First Fridays. I'm sure most of you are aware of First Fridays. If you look at a community and economic development heat map of downtown Phoenix, put a First Friday map on it, that's where the activity has grown over the past several years. That's beyond the financial core, the government core, ASU, and things like that. But the growth right now is happening in Roosevelt Row, in Grand Avenue, and so on. So it aligns. And I'm also finally here to say that this is doable. And if you're not working with the city on arts and culture, then please feel free to reach out to ArtLink, because together we're going to move forward and make this valley and this state known for its arts and culture. And it will make others want to move here and invest here, and we will be stronger for it. So that's my first intro. Thank you.
Well said. That was amazing, Katrina. Thank you so much. Well, I'm so excited by the conversation we've had here today, and I know that we have some questions coming in. So I think we have a few minutes, right, Carrie, to answer some questions. And I think, let me see, open up the chat here. I think Amanda in particular had a response to one of them already. Amanda, if you wanted to address that.
Yeah, so first I wanted to just say, you know, Katrina, you hit the nail on the head about people being drawn to the creatives and the artists and the places and where development actually happens. We find so often that people, you know, they want to be where the creatives are, because they want to know what do the creatives know that we don't, you know, and they're bringing just such a unique, lively area. But I wanted to address the question from Lucas. So the question was, would love to know if there's any strategies in place or known by the panelists that help measure or quantify the economic impact of the kind of infrastructure and public art projects detailed in the presentations. So we actually do a return on investment study for our council, and that doesn't necessarily pull out individual art pieces, but we look at all of our expenditures. So when we talk about that infrastructure we put in place, for example, I showed you know, the hoop lights, but what you may not have seen in that photo is that there were lit up art benches. In all of our infrastructure projects, we've said we want to include an art bench, you know, painted by a local artist. So all of those expenditures then are looked at in comparison to the revenue and the return that we're receiving. And so we know to date that for every $1 we've invested, we see a return of $1.53. So that's pretty substantial. But we also, you know, when you think about placemaking, Dorina mentioned, you know, events and activating spaces. And certainly that's an easy ROI for us to measure, you know, how many attendees are in the district, what kind of upticks do we see in sales, and overall community satisfaction and engagement, because it's one thing to have the place, it's another to have things that draw people and keep them in the place. So those were just a couple that we use. I'd be curious to know what other panelists are using. But
Well-
overall, I think, oh yeah, jump on in.
Well, no, I was just going to say, and I would say from a governance standpoint, that's amazing that I mean, of course, we would hope, right? Because, and on the private side, it's very entrepreneurial. It's very, hey, I've got this super stealth project. I'm taking down this property. I don't want anyone to know that I'm buying it, that what I'm doing with it, how much money is going into it, but we want to make it super rad. So I think there becomes a point where people want to be intentional. Like we have filtered out any speculator out of Roosevelt Row. If you're going to come and land bank, pack up and go. If you're not trying to fit in, pack up and go. And what we're finding is that we're attracting developers and investors from all around the world who love the local vibe and also see the opportunity of that all bridges lead to Phoenix and come back and forth. And we're such a welcoming place. And when I say Phoenix, I mean the Valley as a whole. And Roosevelt Row is a perfect case study for that, where now we don't have to educate so much developers and investors and business owners about what to do. It's about, you know, how to do it politely and maybe not, you know, do what you might do in Old Town Scottsdale on Roosevelt Row. Don't do what you did in Vegas on Roosevelt Row, but, you know, fit in and they want to. And they want to participate. And a lot of their big ideas cross over to the public realm, which is why it's exciting what John and Amanda, you know, are working on to make that possible. I know when we were trying to bring in Peritoneum, a public art sculpture from the X Square competition at ASU, it was going to go to the landfill outside of the School of Design to make way for the next public art installation. We took it on. It was there for years until the wood was so brittle. But there wasn't a way to legally do it. But we asked the city and they created a path over time to make temporary art activations permitted and legal. So, you know, it could all be within the realm of a possibility. So finding the right sculptures, finding the right partnerships, finding the right murals is really important. And it's really based on curating. And even if you don't know how to do it, that's where ArtLink, and full disclosure, I'm a board member of ArtLink. And what ArtLink does, I recommend to every single public and private sector client because they're great partners to work with.
If I could hop in on the city ROI side very briefly, and Doreen, I think you're absolutely right about all of that. We also look at ROI, we look at sales tax in particular, versus investment, all of that. But another way to measure that for us is vacancy. You know, we look and we have very low vacancy in downtown Chandler, which is really helpful. Obviously, the office market is a little bit tricky right now, but in terms of retail frontage in particular, where you're getting a lot of that foot traffic driven spending, we don't have a huge amount of space available at any given moment. And I think that speaks to this sort of sticky economic development that creative placemaking drives, because you're capturing the customer base by bringing them down to your retail and restaurants, you're giving them a place they want to be. They then see all the different options that are available to them, right? In downtown Chandler, maybe they're coming to Brickyard for a nice dinner and then going for drinks afterward. But as they go from place to place, they see all these other restaurants or shops they'd like to visit. And because they're walking, they're going at a pace where they can stop and look in the windows and stop if it's daytime and go in the store and shop. And so for us, we found that at least in terms of retail, restaurants, and otherwise, downtowns are a great place to be. And placemaking is a great place to get customers to them. And of course, you know, as it said, people want to live where the activity is happening. So for us, we're seeing a real uptick in housing development as well, which is a real bonus for our restaurants and retailers, because again, it's more captured customer base, more sales tax.
John, I'm sure you guys hear this as well, though, from site selectors at the end of the day, you know, when they're looking at all of the factors, sometimes that quality of life and having that unique center really is the determining factor and why they end up coming to the community. And certainly that's another way you can measure when you hear that, in the discussion with site selectors. And I'm sure you guys have heard that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and for us, it's interesting. We don't have huge parcels of land left that are unaccounted for. But even from the smaller infill developers, it's the same thing. They're inspired to do creative projects and they want to invest in that way because of the creativity all around them. So whether big or small, we hear that a lot. Yeah.
But then the next thing is that making sure that their tenants are also given the playbook so that they too can know how to participate and engage in an equitable, sustainable way, because really they're the ones that you want, that the property owner wants to thrive as a business, whatever their operation is. And again, if we're not as a community completing the circle, that's where Local First and Rose, we're super lucky in downtown Phoenix to have all these groups. I know Downtown Mesa Partnership and you all in Gilbert and Chandler have great relationships. And I think it's a testament to, it's a learning lesson for other municipalities to figure out how to get organized and engaged, big or small. I think Thomas Barr with Local First Arizona is on here, and what Local First is doing in the rural communities is just monumental. Empowering smaller towns to re-energize their little downtowns and their cultural cores is the heart of America. So it's amazing to see Local First branching out from, looking at this micro, tiny little ecosystem on Roosevelt Row and downtown Phoenix to really being a statewide and regional and truly a national advocate for how to do this from a business standpoint and show those partnerships. I know from an economic development standpoint, it might not make sense how Local First has such a huge part of the arts, but these creative entrepreneurs, it's the art of ... We want them in our neighborhoods, and a photographer one day could become a property owner and historic preservationist the next day, like Wayne Rainey and Monarch, and enable so many other entrepreneurs to do their magic.
Just a couple of quick notes before we go to the next question. Real quick, a shout out to the cities who participate in the Influx program. 6 Valley cities across the Valley participate in Influx. And if you're not familiar with Influx, I won't go too long, but these 6 cities have worked together for now coming on 10 years to do a dynamic collaborative program around public art that results in it's a call to artists, but it results in public art installations in each of the 6 cities. So Glendale, Peoria, Phoenix, Chandler, Tempe, and Scottsdale are currently involved, maybe more cities to come in the upcoming cycle. Number 2, I do like to simplify things sometimes and to demystify things a bit. And part of that, it's very easy to think about art in terms of visual and performing arts. That's very easy. And it's also, if there are a lot of people, I used to kind of joke around and say how we need to talk about art, but without using the word art, because some people use the word art and think it has nothing to do with them when it still has everything to do with them. Do you eat? It's culinary arts.
Like oxygen.
Are you wearing clothes? That's fashion. That's art. Do you have anything on your wall at all? It's likely visual art. Do you hear music in the car? Performing arts. All of these architecture, lest we forget architecture. Are you surrounded by the beautiful built environment? If whoever doesn't see architects as artists and creatives, that's a whole other thing right there. So it's highly relevant. It's highly relevant. All of these things matter. All of these contribute to quality of life and absolutely to our community and economic development. Additionally, as it relates to cultural relevancy, and our friend Mike Langley from GPL, thank you for that question. In terms of how, there are a myriad of ways to do this, but maybe the most important thing is to embed the cultural conversation in these efforts. It's very easy to do so. It may seem complicated, but it is not, because the celebration of a vibrant arts and culture community, and especially in a state where we have such a rich history, if we're not celebrating all of the cultures that have contributed to the places within Arizona, we're missing the boat, frankly. We could say we're not even doing it right, frankly. We could say we need to improve, very frankly. But in terms of opportunity and where we can benefit from that conversation and focusing on different ethnicities and backgrounds and all of that, it results in a textured environment. And that's what people are looking for. When you travel, going back to hospitality really quickly, I know we're running out of time, but do you all travel? I'm sure you do, especially pre-COVID, sorry. But I mean, when you travel, where do you go? Do you go to places that are boring? I don't think so, because it takes money and you want to travel where you're seeing something interesting, even if it's something where there isn't a huge population. If it's out in the country, there's still a culture there. If you're going to an urban center, what are you doing when you go? I have to venture a guess that the majority of us are going to connect with arts and culture in these cities. That's what people are doing when they come here. And that's worthy of investment. We can build on the natural, very human sensibility that we want to be engaged with things that are vibrant and textured and creative and be surrounded by interesting people. And that's what all of this means.
Absolutely. Again, well said, truly. So we have, I think, maybe time for one more question. I think one that seems to be the most or be particularly relevant is for a city wanting to benefit from incorporating art into a community, what should their implementation strategy be? And then are there any recommendations in terms of funding and making that happen?
I can hop in here first. I'd say talk to Katrina if you're in Phoenix or broader. But secondarily, at least for us, finding local artists and tapping into that community is a great place to start. Again, I'm fortunate that I work with very closely our visual arts coordinator, but most cities now have somebody who does public art for the city, right? There's an art space position. So connecting with those in other cities to see what their structures are is probably, we don't need to reinvent the wheel here for every city. And then also thinking about, for me, we like to go with murals because it's a small amount of money invested for a big impact. So identifying ways that you can, at a low cost of entry, create large impact is probably a really good way to at least get the ball rolling on funding, because it makes it a little bit less, there's less inertia there.
Absolutely. Okay, great. I know we're getting some comments coming in and everything. I think we might need to have a follow-up event or something to kind of get into this a bit more deep in the future. But thank you to everyone, and I'll just go ahead and pass it to Carrie.
Yeah, thank you everyone for attending, especially thank you to Mackenzie and our sponsor Smith Group. We are recording this. We will have the recording out to you probably tomorrow, and we may schedule a follow-up. We'll see. It seems like there's a lot of interest and a lot of excitement. Everybody, as you can see how critical art is to economic development, and coming from an art background, I'm so happy that we're having this conversation. So thank you to each of our panelists today, and thank you to everybody that came to this event. You will be seeing more from AAD, I'm sure, on this topic, but other topics as well as related to economic development. So thank you today, and we will see you soon.